Victor Adeyemi had always been the type of man who appeared to have everything in life sorted. At just 35 years old, he was already a well-known CEO in the bustling city of Lagos, running a tech company that had risen to great success under his leadership. From the outside, his life looked perfect. His home was a sprawling mansion, tucked away in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods, and his garage housed luxury cars that most people could only dream of owning. Yet, despite his material success, there was one thing his mother constantly reminded him of: a family. Mrs. Adeyemi, a traditional woman at heart, believed that all the wealth in the world meant very little if it wasn't shared with a loving wife and children. Every time they sat down for a family dinner, she found a way to steer the conversation towards the topic of marriage. "Victor, you're not getting any younger, my dear. It's time to think about settling down. What's the use of all this wealth if you don't have someone to share it with?" she would say, her voice gentle but firm. But Victor wasn't moved by these words. To him, his business was his priority, and the idea of marriage seemed like an unnecessary distraction. Victor had tried dating in the past, but none of the relationships had ever worked out. He often found that the women he dated didn't understand his commitment to his work. Late nights, business meetings, and constant travel left little time for romance, and he preferred it that way. He didn't see the point in forcing something that didn't come naturally. Marriage, in his eyes, was a lifelong commitment, and he wasn't ready to tie himself down just yet. But Mrs. Adeyemi wasn't one to give up easily. One particular Saturday afternoon, she decided to take matters into her own hands. As Victor sat in his home office, immersed in work, his mother called him into the living room. "Victor, come down. I have someone I'd like you to meet," she said in her usual motherly tone. Reluctantly, Victor made his way downstairs, expecting to meet one of his mother's many friends. However, what greeted him was something else entirely. Sitting on the couch was a young woman, her posture nervous, her eyes avoiding his. She was dressed in a simple, modest outfit, and her hands fidgeted in her lap. "Victor, this is Linda. She's the daughter of my old friend, Mrs. Adeyemi," introduced her with a wide smile. Victor raised an eyebrow. He immediately knew what his mother was trying to do, and he wasn't having it. Victor had never been one to hide his emotions, and at that moment, his frustration was written all over his face. He didn't like being forced into anything, least of all into meeting a potential wife handpicked by his mother. The idea seemed old-fashioned to him, as if he were in some sort of arranged marriage. "Mum, I'm not interested in this," he said, his tone firm but respectful. He glanced briefly at Linda, who sat quietly, clearly feeling uncomfortable. "I have work to do. I don't have time for this right now," he added, turning on his heels and heading back to his office without another word. Linda, on her part, had felt out of place from the moment she entered the Adeyemi mansion. She had only agreed to this meeting because her mother had insisted, but now she felt foolish. She hadn't come here to force herself into anyone's life, and Victor's reaction only confirmed what she already knew: this was a mistake. She wished she could disappear and never return. Victor, meanwhile, returned to his work, relieved that the awkward encounter was over. He assumed that was the end of it. But Mrs. Adeyemi had other plans. Mrs. Adeyemi wasn't one to back down from a challenge. She saw something special in Linda, something she believed her son had missed. Victor had always been a stubborn man, focused on his work to the point of ignoring the important things in life. But his mother was determined to change that. She took Linda under her wing, treating her like the daughter she never had. Over the next few weeks, Mrs. Adeyemi became a guiding force in Linda's life. She noticed that Linda had a quiet beauty about her, one that wasn't immediately noticeable but could shine with a little encouragement. So, she took Linda shopping, introducing her to elegant outfits that highlighted her natural charm. Linda, who had always preferred modest, understated clothing, found herself transforming under Mrs. Adeyemi's guidance. But it wasn't just about the clothes. Mrs. Adeyemi also worked on building Linda's confidence. She encouraged her to speak up, to hold her head high, and to embrace her worth. With time, Linda began to blossom, her self-esteem growing with each passing day. Mrs. Adeyemi knew that Victor had been too quick to judge, and she believed that once he saw the real Linda, he wouldn't be able to resist her charm. One evening, after a particularly long and stressful day at work, Victor returned home, expecting the usual quiet atmosphere. He walked into the living room, but what he saw stopped him in his tracks. Sitting on the couch was a woman he barely recognized. Linda, the shy and modest girl he had met weeks ago, was gone. In her place was a radiant, confident woman, her hair perfectly styled, and her simple yet elegant gown accentuating her beauty. Her presence filled the room, and for the first time, Victor truly saw her. His eyes widened in surprise as he turned to his mother, who was sitting nearby with a knowing smile on her face. "Is that Linda?" he asked, unable to hide his shock. His mother simply nodded. "Yes, Victor. This is the same Linda you've been ignoring all this time," she said, her voice filled with satisfaction. Victor couldn't take his eyes off her. How had he missed this? He felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him, remembering how dismissive he had been when they first met. Linda, however, simply smiled at him, her eyes calm and composed, as if she had already forgiven him for his previous behavior. From that moment, something shifted inside Victor. He found himself lingering at home more often, looking for excuses to be around Linda. There was something about her now that captivated him. It wasn't just her appearance, although she looked stunning, it was the way she carried herself, with quiet grace and confidence. He began to notice little things about her that he hadn't before. The way she laughed softly at his mother's jokes, the kindness in her eyes when she spoke, and the way she never seemed to need the spotlight. Slowly but surely, Victor found himself drawn to her. He started conversations, initially casual and light, but soon they began talking about deeper topics: life, ambitions, and dreams. Victor was surprised to learn that Linda had dreams of her own. She wasn't just a pretty face. She had a passion for fashion design and had always dreamed of starting her own clothing line. Victor found himself admiring her ambition and determination. Linda wasn't just someone his mother had chosen for him. She was a woman with her own dreams, and the more time he spent with her, the more he realized how much they had in common. As the weeks turned into months, Victor found himself falling for Linda in a way he hadn't expected. It wasn't like the shallow relationships he'd had in the past, where attraction was based on fleeting physical appearances or convenience. This was different. Linda's beauty was more than skin deep. She had a strength and resilience that he admired, and she never tried to change herself to fit anyone else's expectations, even his. Victor respected that about her. She had taken his mother's guidance and made it her own, growing into a confident woman without losing the essence of who she was. One evening, as they sat together in the garden, enjoying the cool breeze and the soft glow of the setting sun, Victor realized he couldn't hold back his feelings any longer. He turned to Linda, his heart pounding in his chest. "Linda," he began, his voice soft but sincere, "I was wrong about you when we first met. I didn't take the time to see who you really are, and for that, I'm sorry. But now, I can't imagine my life without you." Linda looked at him, her eyes filled with warmth. She smiled gently, and Victor knew that everything was about to change. Linda's smile grew as she looked into Victor's eyes. She had felt the same way for some time but had been unsure of how he felt. "I didn't expect any of this either, Victor," she admitted softly. "But I'm glad your mother brought us together. I've grown to care about you deeply, and I've fallen for you too." Her words filled Victor's heart with joy. He realized that the very thing he had once feared, commitment, love, marriage, was now something he couldn't wait for. Linda had changed his perspective on everything. She had shown him what it meant to find someone who truly understood and supported him, someone who didn't just see his wealth or his success, but the person he was beneath it all. A few months later, on a bright and beautiful day, Victor and Linda stood at the altar, exchanging vows in front of their family and friends. Mrs. Adeyemi, sitting proudly in the front row, beamed with happiness, knowing that her persistence had led to this moment.